read on the markets here. The Monday trade on Balance of Power. Thanks for joining us. Back to reality here in Washington, where, boy, it feels a lot like last week. The Department of Homeland Security still closed, the war in Iran still raging, and a lot of people asking questions about how either might come to an end. We don't have a lot of answers this morning, although we'll try our best with Nathan Dean. Everybody's sharing pictures of members of Congress having a good time. It is the 2-week recess. They weren't late. Friday saw everyone leave town. Of course, a lot of folks left town on Thursday night, too. We got, Robert Garcia. TMZ is really leading the charge on this coverage, appealing to its fans to send pictures of members of Congress having a good time. Here we are, Congressman Robert Garcia. It's a good bet I'm in Vegas. Hanging at, what casino was he at here? This is interesting. Following, of course, in the footsteps of Lindsey Graham, who was at Disney over the weekend, with all the tip sheets asking, you failed to reopen the government. Now what are you going to do? Going to Disney. Okay, let's bring in Nathan Dean. America's Dad knows a lot about Disney and the Contemporary. And is it Chef Mickey's?
Chef Mickey's.
That's where, so we can't show you this because it's TMZ. It's got the photograph, but he's in there eating. He had the buffet at Chef Mickey's. Now this is at the Contemporary, right? Why would Lindsey Graham find himself? This is the one where the characters walk around, isn't it?
Yeah. So I mean, like when I took my kids there, I mean, there's chicken nuggets flying everywhere. I mean, it's not like it's not.
It's a food fight. You're saying.
It's definitely not Michelin star dining at it. But look, this is one of those things where even the Senate did their job, at least in their eyes. They did their job. They passed a bill, and they all left town even before the House got to this thing. Yeah. And Speaker Johnson came back and said, well, look, we're going to pass a 60-day stopgap, and we'll try and jam the Senate. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't really work like that. I mean, as much as the House members hate this, the Senate jams the House.
Right.
Now, there's talk about, are they going to come back next week? They're not coming back this week. I don't think they're coming back next week for two reasons. One, there's a lot of trips, a lot of codels out there that people are flying abroad. And secondly, I'm not exactly sure what they would do if they came back. Mm-hmm. They would essentially just be giving speeches and saying, look, the other side needs to fix this here. But ultimately, with the DHS shutdown, what I think happened is they reset the clock for pressure points. Mm-hmm. Because if President Trump's executive order to fund TSA begins to alleviate some of the pressure. I mean, BWI had a 7-hour line yesterday. If it begins to alleviate...
Are you kidding me?
No, 7 hours at BWI yesterday.
Wow.
I mean, so DCA and Dulles are doing a little bit better.
Yeah,
but
I keep hearing DCA people are flying through. I guess BWI is a different matter.
But BWI was really bad. So if that begins to alleviate in terms of pressure, I think it just resets the clock in terms of the next pressure point, and I'm not exactly sure what that is.
If TSA is getting paid, though, on this executive order, does that relieve some of the issue at the airport? Because that's the concern some have, is that you're taking the pressure point away. DHS is closed the rest of the year.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, you take away the TSA pressure point, what else do you have there? FEMA.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have hurricane season coming up, June, July-ish. We have Coast Guard, we have the other members of the Department of Homeland Security, about 270,000 individuals that aren't getting paid at the moment. But I think this is sort of indicative of where Washington is going after the midterms, especially if the Democrats take the House. Mm-hmm. Because President Trump just said, look, Congress is not doing its job. I'm going to unilaterally fund individuals using funds, we think, from the One Big Beautiful Bill. And essentially, if you don't like me doing that, sue me. And the Democrats in this perspective just said, look, there's no political advantage here to sue you. We've done our job. We've worked with the Republicans on this. And so we're just going to not really negotiate. And so I think you're going to see a little bit more of this as we get into the second half of President Trump's presidency here, because it's a situation where both sides look at the same issue and says, no, we don't need to negotiate.
Wait, you do wonder, but I know that FEMA's controversial for some in the MAGA movement, and it's been an issue in this administration. The Coast Guard?
Yeah.
How come the Coast Guard doesn't know? Everyone talks about the TSA, I guess, because we're waiting in line. Yeah. Coast Guard's not been paid yet.
No.
What do these guys have to do?
Well, and calling in sick for a Coast Guard is much different than calling in for sick for a TSA. I mean, a lot of these TSA workers, according to reporting by Bloomberg and other outlets, are going and doing Uber jobs and driving for Lyft and so forth. So they're trying to replicate their income. It's a little bit different story when you have Coast Guard or FEMA. But, we do think, look, let's just say that both sides come back in 2 weeks. They do want to get the DHS shutdown resolved for one simple reason. There's a lot left on their calendar in the Senate that they want to do. Crypto, housing, reconciliation bill. And for, Kevin Warsh's nomination hearings, April 13th, that week, as long as they're talking about, when reporters are coming up to him and saying, look, what are you doing on the DHS shutdown? The Republicans want to come back and say, this is what we're doing on affordability. And so there is this little pressure point to get things done, because ultimately they want to see that they can govern ahead of the U.S. midterms in November.
Really interesting. So it's Robert Garcia went to Fontainebleau. That's where he was in Las Vegas. The pictures, is he playing blackjack, James, or was he doing something else? Blackjack guy. Amateur photog walked up to him, asked if he was enjoying himself, knowing federal employees were not getting paid, TMZ reports. Garcia did not answer, but 2 security guards shoot him away. Garcia told the guard he didn't mind the guy took photos, and here they are. Interesting. So it costs $44 to get a kid in the buffet at Chef Mickey's, and you're saying it's not that good. $69 for an adult. Do we think that, like, does Mickey come over to everyone there? Did Lindsay spend time with Mickey and Minnie?
He did. If it's the best of my recollection, it's Mickey, Minnie, Goofy, and Donald.
Yeah.
And look, you're paying that price so that you don't have to go meet those characters in the park.
Okay.
I mean, from a parent perspective.
Right, a controlled environment here.
But there was probably a moment where Mickey came over and said,
wow,
and maybe there's a picture involved.
I think we're going to see all of this. Producer James done a lot of reporting on this in the last little bit here. He tells us that they usually have Mickey Mouse-shaped waffles. That's the picture.
That's one of the best
that I think we're going to need. He's pouring coffee there on the photograph. He was spending time in the Tangled section of the theme park. So everybody comes back after 2 weeks. Let's say TSA's all back on the job because they're getting paid. And DHS remains closed for the rest of the year. Could they, in fact... You mentioned reconciliation. Take care of all of this in a reconciliation 2.0. We're talking about putting ICE funding in there. Why not all the rest?
Well, you're not supposed to do appropriations as part of reconciliation. I mean, that's one of the
You're
not supposed to.
Right.
And this is where the Senate parliamentarian gets involved. And, but look, ICE is funded through the One Big Beautiful Bill through fiscal year of 2029. They got to $75 billion. So it's not out of the realm of possibilities. But the thing with the reconciliation, and this is what we just told our clients this morning, if you get something that's small, 200, 300 billion, that's dedicated solely to defense funding, I think you have an easy time. You could probably get the votes. You could even probably pick up someone like Senator Fetterman for that.
Yeah. Okay.
But if you begin to balloon it up, as you're beginning to hear in terms of Obamacare cuts or farmer aid, or if next thing you know, this turns into a $1.2 trillion mega bill, and look, everybody in the town is going to say, please attach something to this.
Absolutely.
And if you have President Trump saying, pass the Save America Act this way, when Senator Mike Lee even said you can't do it, that's when things begin to break down. So small, targeted, possible, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Republicans said, let's try and get it to the president's desk for the 4th of July for that celebration.
Wow. I've got to ask you about rescheduling, because it just is a story that doesn't seem to ever resolve. It's been weeks since we've talked about cannabis rescheduling. With a Democratic member of Congress, a Democrat from Tennessee, Steve Cohen. He's out with a letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi and to the DEA Administrator Terry Cole to find out what is going on since the president ordered the quick completion of rescheduling. He's asking the officials to account for why DOJ missed a deadline to issue guidelines easing research barriers into Schedule I drugs. Marijuana Moment has been on this. Every time I bring it up, it's usually their column.
Yep.
Is this over? What are we doing here?
So the marijuana investors we talked to are essentially asking the same question, and they're saying, look, are there individuals that are trying to circumvent President Trump's executive order?
So it's getting personal?
You have to do that. Oh, they're because look, these marijuana stocks, like we say, they have hot sauce. These things jump.
Yes,
the
sir.
volatility is pretty significant, but right now they are really low. I mean, a lot of them are under $5. Yeah. And so there's a lot of confusion here about the process. And I've always gone back to the point where, look, nothing in Washington happens quickly. Even if the president were to say, I want you to reschedule it right now, somebody's got to write a rule. Somebody's got to be able to get this past the Administrative Procedures Act, and that takes time. So ultimately, I'm banking on the idea that usually the DOJ and the DEA is not in the business of telling the president they don't want him to do something. or at least we're not going to do what your order tells us to do.
Yeah.
So I do think that you'll see some type of movement ahead of the midterms, but it may not be full reschedulization. It may just be we're getting the process back on track.
Does that move the stocks on it if there's any evidence of this thing moving?
Any evidence whatsoever, you'll see a jump up, and then you'll see a subsequent decline once you see the reality.
Oh,
just
all right.
because it's
the
pure,
reality.
It's a pure event contract.
I see.
Compared to policy headlines.
And it sounds like you sell news in that world, or once it appears to be something different.
I mean, the tax relief for these companies is somewhat significant,
Yeah.
but it's such a difficult business to begin with that it's going to be a challenge.
A lot of folks have said that the false promise was the TAM. The total addressable market was not as large as a lot of investors during COVID thought when we were bidding these things up to double and triple digits. Is that going to be the end story here for this sector?
There's a lot of it. I mean, look, the big tobacco companies aren't buying them.
Right.
They're not involved here because the profit is. And look, it comes down to regulations, risk, all this type of overhead costs to these businesses. Because when you're comparing to something that's really cheap, also you can buy it, just grow it on your own.
Sure, right.
When you tack on all these overhead costs, you need to have a significant margin to be profitable. And we've seen a lot of consolidation in this industry over the last couple of years as farms begin to realize that they can't reach that profitability.
Wow, amazing. I heard you were a referee last weekend. You put the whole uniform on?
No, I
you
was
get
just
the stripes or no?
I did give a kid an unsportsmanlike conduct.
You
penalty.
did?
I did.
Wow, is that true?
10-year-old boy.
Yeah.
He was mouthing off.
Wow, see?
Unsportsmanlike
America's
conduct.
dad will teach you a lesson very quickly. Parents are okay and everyone's good?
They were fine so far.
Life on the sidelines with Nathan Dean. This is the whole side of Nathan we don't ever get to see. He is the best in the business, senior U.S. policy analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence and a close friend of the program. If you subscribe to the Balance of Power podcast, you'll get Nathan's as well. I encourage you to do that by going to Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll assemble the panel next. Rick and Jeannie are on the way on Bloomberg.